how sweet it would be if by my own I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. That is Nina Simone singing. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Juan.
Well, oil prices have jumped to yet another record high, nearing $142 a barrel in Asian trading today. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Thursday fell to its lowest mark in more than a year, and General Motors stock prices to its lowest levels in more than a quarter century at the close of trading on Thursday. At over $140 a barrel, oil prices have more than doubled from $70 just 1 year ago. The latest price surge comes a day after OPEC's president said crude prices could reach $170 this summer. Meanwhile, Libya has threatened to cut oil production in response to U.S. threats against oil producers. The House recently passed a bill that would allow the Justice Department to sue members of OPEC for limiting supplies of oil and setting prices. Meanwhile, OPEC, which produces 40% of the world's oil, says speculators are responsible for pushing up crude in reaction to a falling dollar and tensions in oil-producing countries such as Iran, Iraq, and Nigeria.
For more on oil, we're joined by Michael Klare, author of 13 books, including Resource Wars and Blood and Oil, which is just made into a documentary. His latest book is called Rising Power, Shrinking Planet, The New Geopolitics of Energy. He's a defense analyst for The Nation and director of the 5-college program in Peace and World Security Studies at Hampshire College in Amherst. We're also joined by Arun Gupta, editor of the Indypendent newspapers, written extensively on the political economy of the global oil order. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Michael Klare, lay out your thesis on Rising Power, Shrinking Planet.
Well, the title helps, which is that we're in a world where there are new players on the world stage, China, India, other developing countries with a vast appetite for resources, especially oil, at the same time that the world's supply of energy in particular is shrinking. I should add there's a third set of players, that is the older industrial countries, the United States in particular, that don't want to consume less. So you have a collision of demand, which is not shrinking, and a supply that is, and that's what's pushing up prices. And in the competition for what's left, these countries are militarizing their pursuit of energy, and that's leading to geopolitical struggle around the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Central Asia. And I fear that unless we change our energy habits, this competition could lead to military friction, to crisis, and to war.
And to what degree, though, are these battles new? Because aren't battles over resources and energy? I mean, I'm thinking of Jürgen's book, The Prize, going back throughout the history of all the major wars and the central role that control over energy resources have played for major powers. To what degree is this new from prior eras?
Well, of course, resource competition has been a central feature in world history, in warfare, from the beginning of time. What's new is that you have not only the traditional powers, the European empires of the past, which were responsible for World War I, World War II, the Cold War, but now you have the rise of India and especially China with a ravenous need for resources, just an extraordinary need. And this is changing everything on the planet. China is in Africa and Latin America, everywhere, and this really is a new dynamic. And at the same time, we see all of a sudden all of the major resources in demand beginning to shrink. Oil, copper, iron ore, coal, all of these resources on which the world's industrial economies depend suddenly appear to be at risk. And this is unprecedented. So you have this extraordinary collision, which we see at the gas pump, but I think it will affect everything on the planet.
And yet, Arun Gupta, you have the oil companies, Chevron, ExxonMobil, the others, making more money than they've ever in history. How do you explain that?
Well, that has to do with the rising prices, and I think there's other factors at play. Supply and demand are somewhat of an issue, but speculation is an enormous issue. We've seen oil prices rise by nearly six-fold from 2003, and yet there are no gas lines. Oil inventories are at 8-year highs. Gasoline stocks are at 3 years highs. So you can't say that it's this supply and demand issue fundamentally. It has much more to do with speculation, but the speculators couldn't be doing this if supplies weren't tight, and so we need to ask, why exactly are supplies tight? And Michael's book is enormously informative and insightful, but I do want to take issue with the notion of shrinking planet, because I don't think it's actually supported by the data that's out there. One of the most important concepts to understand is what's known as the reserve to production ratio. That is, what is a total of global proven reserves of oil, and how many years would that last at current production rate? Now, if we look at the last 20 years, it's basically unchanged. Global proven reserves keep actually rising year after year. They're now at 1.24 trillion barrels, according to the latest BP statistical review. And you could also say the same about natural gas. There's about 62 years of natural gas supplies. That's also virtually unchanged since 1987. During the 90s, this went up a little, and it's gone down a little recently. But this has to do with the legacy of the late 90s. In the late 90s, there was an absolute collapse in the oil industry and oil prices when it went down to $10 a barrel following the Asian financial crisis. And so what you had was all these oil wells going offline. You had all this oil exploration grounding to a halt. You had an enormous loss of human know-how as engineers and technicians went out of the industry. It takes 7 to 10 years to bring mega projects online. And so what we are in a way reaping is the legacy of that